Homages are common in comics, especially when it comes to the concepts espoused by a standard superhero universe, i.e., something published by DC or Marvel. Hell, some of my more popular videos are the ones where I cover Astro City stories. Anyway, this video is about one such homage, the Big Bang Comics universe, helmed by Gary Carlson and Chris Ecker, and with contributions by many creators over the years. Big Bang Comics' main focus is on emulating the tone and style of the characters they were homaging. P.S. A lot of the information comes from the Big Bang Comics website, which helped me write this script. I'll leave a link in the description for those interested in learning more about their work. So, this universe was first conceived in the pages of Megaton, a self published comic by Carlson with art by a host of artists, including Eric Larson and Rob Liefeld, who are better known for being part of the group that would go on to form Image Comics later on. However, only some of the characters from that series, like the Superman homage Ultiman, actually end up being relevant later on. Others, like the Batman and Robin homages of Crusader and Sentinel, were not seen beyond this series. Later on, in the first issue of the comic Berserker, also by Carlson, a new Batman homage, Night Watchman, would debut in the backup. This one would stick, and we would see the world fleshed out a bit more in more backups in the pages of Berserker. However, finally, these characters would eclipse Berserker and star in their own title, published by. Three issues were planned for release under the publisher Caliber Press. These would be homages to the story told in the Golden Age, the Silver Age, and the Modern Age, respectively. Granted, back then, modern meant 90s modern, so. However, to meet Caliber's demands, the Golden Age issue was split into three issues: issues 1, 2, and a 0 issue instead of an issue 5. These would feature short, complete stories in anthology form. Issue 3 was the Silver Age focused issue, while issue 4 looked like this. Some of the noteworthy things from the Caliber Press era of Big Bang Comics include Night Watchman's creator being Tom King, a pseudonym used by Carlson and Ecker, making it hilarious that an actual Tom King would go on to write comics featuring the character Night Watchman was homaging. Issue 1 featured the Badge, a mix of DC's Guardian and Marvel's Captain America, fighting a bunch of questionable Asian stereotypes. When asked in the letters column about why they would use these harmful depictions, the response boiled down to period authenticity. Speaking of which, issue 2 has Errol Flynn punching Nazis, saying that this should put to rest any rumors that he was a sympathizer. A brief amount of research unearthed that these allegations were recent to the comic's release and not made while Flynn was alive. That is, during the time period this comic is set in. So much for period authenticity. Issue 3's story, the Crisscross Crisis, is a full issue homage to the classic JLA JSA team up across universes. A personal favorite with plenty of Easter eggs for sharp-eyed fans. Finally, issue 4 is set in the era when Megaton took place, with the character also making an appearance. A former villain of the Round Table of America, the JLA homage, returns to battle the heroes, except the team disbanded after several of its members died, got older and weaker, or went MIA over the years. Also, while the art is very much of its time, props to the artist for doing a good job replicating Liefeldian proportions, the story is more compelling than a lot of its peers of that era. Image. In that there is a story worth following being told. When Caliber and the creators split over rights issues, Eric Larson brought in his former mentor into Image in a rather sweet gesture. Carlson has been credited as the man who gave Larson and Liefeld their starts in the comic business, with Liefeld even going so far as to label him the grandfather of Image Comics. As for the Image run, it lasted 35 issues and was a bit of a mixed bag. Most were anthologies, except the stories would often have multiple parts across issues instead of being done in ones like the ones at Caliber. What's worse is that these parts were not guaranteed to appear in consecutive issues, making it very hard to keep track of a particular story. Arguably, the worst offender of this was the crossover with Eric Larson's Savage Dragon, which had him traveling throughout the Big Bang universe throughout space and time because he had a bomb attached to him. This was a three-part story between issues 12, 14, and 18, with the art for issue 18 having not been completed in time, and the pages were eventually completed in issue 33. While this particular instance has been acknowledged by the creators, my instinct tells me that one of the reasons behind the odd publication schedule of the stories was the delay in getting the art for the scripts on times, beyond just issue 18. There's another case that kind of stood out to me, which involves the Sphinx, an original character with elements of DC's Hawkman and Marvel's Iron Man. His first story takes place in issue 9, establishing him as a hero in this world. Then issue 13, which was the original story written and drawn by the creator Jeff Weigel 2 years ago, sees the Sphinx leave the world to protect it while passing on his mantle to another. This is followed by an appearance in issue 20 where we see the original Sphinx meet his would-be successor. And finally, issue 23, where we see the new Sphinx take flight. So not only was this not in consecutive issues, but they weren't in sequential order either. However, when we had an entire issue about a particular story, the quality of the work would sharply increase. Like issue 8, which tells us the tale of Mr. US. In each story in issue 8, the creative team focused on the titular Mr. US and how he kept changing as the world changed around him, inadvertently also serving as commentary on the different ages of comic books as they have evolved over the years. The first story was a classic Golden Age romp in the 40s. The second one saw him reinvented for the Silver Age in the 60s, 2 times. The 70s gave him a more character-focused story in the style of the Bronze Age. The 80s saw Mr. US suffer the effects of the British invasion in comics, with deconstruction, retcons, and angst to spare. And finally, the 90s went extreme! This is one of the best comics published under the Big Bang banner, with the creative team of writer Nat Gurdier, artist Mark Lewis, and inker Jeff Meyer doing excellent work to mimic the style of each era they brought up and changing Mr. US to suit the period appropriately. After the contract with Image ended, the team went back to self-publishing. However, the first attempt, Big Bang Presents, ended after 6 issues due to low sales. After stints in AC Comics and Kablam, the latest venture of Big Bang Comics, Big Bang Adventures, is now published as part of a new imprint alongside the title Anomalies, a Doom Patrol X-Men homage, on the website Indie Planet. While new comics haven't come out in some time, this partnership hasn't yet dissolved, and there remains the promise of new Big Bang comics. However, at this point, we have to discuss one of the issues that kind of started with the Image run and becomes almost impossible to overlook by this point. Due to the sheer number of characters introduced, as well as the fact that they were meant to share histories across universes and timelines, the whole Big Bang Comics universe started to enter a complicated continuity collision. Characters would show up in places where they previously weren't supposed to. Stories would be left unfinished as newer characters showed up. Some very questionable choices were made, and the whole thing became tedious to follow. Anyway, let's talk about some of the more memorable characters from this universe. The Superman substitute for the Big Bang universe. Interestingly, in the pages of Megaton, Ultiman was killed off fairly early so that the focus could shift on the next generation of heroes, including his daughter Ultra Girl. However, in a bit of unintended commentary on the cyclical nature of superhero storytelling, it was Ultiman who would go on to have more appearances, with even his death in Megaton being retconned. There are actually two versions of Ultiman in separate universes. Both are a human named Chris Kelly who got their powers from a meteor. Very noticeable difference from their inspiration. However, that's where the similarities mostly end. Earth A's Ultiman has more elements of the Silver Age Superman, with a calmer demeanor, wackier adventures, and a reporter wife who perhaps embodies some of the negative traits of Silver Age Lois Lane. He also has to periodically recharge his powers by exposing himself to the meteor, with each recharge becoming less effective due to a combination of his age and invulnerability. He also has a daughter called Christy who would go on to become Ultra Girl. As for Earth B's Ultiman, he's not focused a lot, but from what we can tell, he is very clearly based on the Golden Age Superman. He is very hot headed, aggressive, prone to violence, but he's also still very much Superman esque, you know. He also doesn't need to keep exposing himself to the meteor to keep his power, so that's a plus point for him. As a negative, he lost his wife in childbirth. Batman of the Big Bang verse also has two versions, but the Earth B version shows up even less than Earth B Ultiman, so we're just gonna focus on the Earth A one. Reed Randall is the night watchman sworn to fight crime after his brother and sister in law were killed by the mob. He takes over the family clothing empire and also takes his nephew Jerry on as his sidekick, Kid Galahad. Eventually, Kid Galahad drops the kid from his name and works solo, while Reed retires as age catches up to him. However, in the story Graveyard Shift, a much older Reed returns as Night Watchman after the mayor is killed and Galahad is injured trying to save him. And yes, this is a homage to The Dark Knight Returns. However, there are noticeable changes which actually make the story lighter than its inspiration. Galahad and Night Watchman disagree with each other but are still close. An older Ultiman shows up but ends up parting ways with Reed without throwing a punch, and the Pink Flamingo, the Joker equivalent, does not die and is saved by Reed instead. And at the end of the story, Reed retires for good this time, leading to Jerry deciding to be Night Watchman at night and Galahad during the day, while Reed trains Jerry's daughter Guinevere to be the next Kid Galahad. Eventually, after Jerry is no longer able to operate during the day as Galahad due to a ban on superheroes, he becomes Night Watchman for good, partnered with his daughter. Also, there's a Damian Wayne equivalent out there who is also Galahad's son, but I choose to ignore him because of his very terrible name. Rounding out the trinity of Bang comics is not the Wonder Woman wannabe Venus, who shows up sparingly at the start of this line, but the character Thunder Girl, who was clearly the creator's favorite. She has the honor of being co-created by Sheldon Moldoff, who created several Batman villains like Poison Ivy, the Matt Hagen Clayface, and Mr. Freeze. As to why she was the most prominently featured female hero in the lineup, I can make a guess that a lot of her stories were fairly self-contained, seeing as they were done in the style of her inspiration, the C.C. Beck style Captain Marvel, Mary Marvel stories. Molly Wilson becomes Thunder Girl by saying the magic word Alakazam. Originally from Earth B and a member of the Knights of Justice, the JSA equivalent, she ends up stranded on Earth A during the Criss-Cross Crisis crossover and joins the Round Table of America. She also ends up living with a version of her parents who had lost their Molly. Her history gets a bit wonky as she also joins the Whiz Kids, which is the Teen Titans of the Big Bang universe at some point, but it might have been before she was a member of the RTA. It's very confusing. But one of the more notable things about her is that while Thunder Girl is permanently 18, Molly ages in real time and is older than her counterpart. Fans of the comic Black Hammer might remember the character Golden Gale having a similar deal, though Molly is less angsty about it. It's harder to tell if the personalities differ, as sometimes they do and other times they don't. Just like the Sphinx, Dr. Weird is an original property that got folded into the Big Bang universe. He first appeared in a fanzine called Star Studded Comics back in the 60s, where a lot of then upcoming talents would write the character's stories. These include Jim Starlin of Marvel Cosmic fame and George R. R. Martin, who needs no elaboration from me. As for Dr. Weird, his original creator, Howard Keltner, came up with a unique concept. Rex Ward is a time traveler from 2031 who traveled back to 1941. Unfortunately, he ended up in the middle of a robbery and was shot and killed. However, because he died before his time, he is now stuck as a specter, unable to move on until he reaches his original time period. When he was brought into the Big Bang universe, naturally, he was the specter equivalent. Grant Morrison would homage these characters in the pages of DC Comics, making the whole thing come weirdly full circle. The first of the characters we hear of is Optiman, the Ultiman substitute, who dies fighting Earth 45's Super Doomsday. Later on, it is established that Optiman and the rest of the Big Bang Comics homages, I guess, live on Earth 36 of the DC multiverse. I'm leaving it till there for now, as one of the whole reasons I ended up learning about the Big Bang universe was because I was doing research for a video that will be coming in June later this year, focusing on two characters from Earth 36. I promise this video isn't just here to advertise my other videos I'm doing later this year. The Big Bang Comics universe is ambitious, perhaps a bit too much for its own sake. While the deep level of respect for the work they are parodying shows in the works like the Mr. US issue, the Criss-Cross Crisis, and Graveyard Shift, with them taking the original concepts and using them as a basis to create rather original takes on them, one has to question if they would have been better off moderating their output at times. Just to show how ambitious they got, there was an honest to God Knights of Justice TV movie. Yes, I am serious, and no, I am not kidding. It features Ultiman, Thunder Girl, Night Watchman, most likely the Earth B one, and Masker, a character who made only a single appearance in issue 21 of the Image series, who only seems to be here because they wanted to use a female character, and Venus's costume would have been impractical to film in live action. While I haven't seen it, I believe people in the US can rent it. So maybe check it out with an open mind and let me know how it was in the comments below.